Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Aurora's dawn and watched the stars move slowly past the main screen. The cargo ship had been traveling for 3 weeks now through the outer edges of known space. Jake liked these quiet runs between worlds because they gave him time to think and his crew time to rest. The ship carried farming equipment and medical supplies bound for New Dakota, a small colony world that needed both badly. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the control panels. Lisa Chun sat at the sensor station, checking their route, while Katie Walsh piloted the ship with steady hands. Both women had been with Jake for over 2 years and knew their jobs well. The rest of the crew was either sleeping or working in other parts of the ship. Jake walked over to the cargo manifest display and read through it again. Agricultural machinery, medical equipment, food supplies, basic tools, and construction materials filled the hold. The manifest clearly showed no weapons, listed in the standard galactic trade format. This was normal for merchant ships like theirs, because weapons meant higher insurance costs and more questions from port authorities. Pete Rodriguez called from the engine room through the comm system. His voice sounded relaxed as he reported that all systems were running smoothly. The engines were performing well, and fuel consumption was better than expected. Dan Foster added from the medical bay that the crew was healthy and supplies were secure. These regular reports made Jake feel good about his ship and his people. The Aurora's Dawn was not a new ship, but Jake kept it in excellent condition. The hull was strong, the life support systems worked perfectly, and the engines could push them faster than most cargo vessels. Jake had bought the ship 5 years ago with money he saved from his military service. He hired crew members who were skilled and reliable rather than cheap and easy to find not far away in the darkness of space. Another ship moved toward them with very different intentions. The Void Reaper belonged to a group of Zephyrian pirates who had been hunting in this area for months. Captain Vexstar commanded 40 raiders who specialized in attacking merchant ships that traveled alone through remote space routes. Vexstar stood in his command center and studied the sensor readings his crew had just discovered. The scaly green skin on his face showed excitement as he examined the data about the human ship. His yellow eyes glowed brighter when he saw the cargo manifest that his scouts had intercepted from a communication relay station days earlier. Pirate Captain called his officers to gather around the tactical display. Chief Navigator Clickshish pointed at the human ship with one of her 4 arms while Technical Officer Drexmo analyzed the vessel specifications. The ship appeared to be traveling alone with valuable cargo and showed no escort vessels on long range sensors. Clicks accessed their database information about human ships and read the details aloud to the group. Humans were classified as Deathworlders because they came from a planet with dangerous conditions, but their technology seemed basic compared to other space-traveling species. The database noted that humans could be aggressive when threatened, but usually surrendered when faced with superior numbers and firepower. Drexmo studied the Aurora's Dawn specifications and confirmed that the ship had no listed weapon systems. The vessel appeared to be a standard cargo hauler with basic shields and normal engines. He estimated that their own ship could easily overpower the human vessel in any direct confrontation. Vexstar made his decision quickly because opportunities like this did not come often in the Outer Rim territories. A lone merchant ship with valuable cargo and no weapons was exactly the kind of target his crew needed to make their raids profitable. He ordered his navigation officer to plot an intercept course that would bring them alongside the human ship in 6 hours. The pirate crew began preparing for the attack with practiced efficiency. Boarding parties checked their weapons and equipment, while the ship's gunners powered up the main weapon systems. Technical specialists prepared hacking tools to disable the human ship's communications and defensive systems. Back on the Aurora's dawn, Jake Morrison had no idea that pirates were approaching his ship. He completed his evening inspection of the bridge systems and prepared to get some sleep. Lisa Chun would take the night watch, while Katie Walsh rested in her quarters. The normal routine of a merchant ship continued as it had for thousands of similar journeys. Jake walked through the corridors of his ship and checked on various crew members before heading to his cabin. Steve Miller was maintaining the loading equipment in the cargo bay, while Rick Barnes was updating inventory records. Tony Garcia worked on routine engine maintenance with Pete Rodriguez, and Amy Turner was monitoring communication channels for any important messages. Carol Adams was in the navigation room double, checking their course and making sure they would arrive at New Dakota on schedule. The colony was expecting their supplies and had already arranged for unloading crews to meet them at the spaceport. Jake looked forward to completing another successful delivery run. In his cabin, Jake reviewed the ship's logs and made notes about crew performance and equipment status. Everything looked normal and routine, just the way he liked it. The Aurora's dawn was his home and his business, and he took pride in running both well. He set his alarm for the morning watch change and settled down to sleep. 6 hours later, a Void Reaper dropped out of faster-than-light travel just behind the human cargo ship. The pirates had timed their approach perfectly to catch the Aurora's dawn during a quiet shift when most of the crew would be sleeping. Vextar smiled as his prey appeared on the main screen, completely unaware of the danger that now surrounded them. Lisa Chun noticed the new contact on her sensor display during her routine sweep of nearby space. The blip appeared suddenly and was moving toward them at high speed. She immediately called Captain Morrison to the bridge because unknown ships in this remote area usually meant trouble. Jake arrived on the bridge within minutes and studied the sensor readings carefully. The approaching vessel was much larger than Aurora's dawn and showed weapon signatures that clearly marked it as a military or pirate ship. He ordered Katie Walsh to her pilot station and called the rest of the crew to battle stations through the ship's communication system. The unknown ship sent a communication request that appeared on their main screen. Jake accepted the transmission and found himself looking at a reptilian creature with green scaly skin and bright yellow eyes. The alien wore what appeared to be military equipment and spoke in heavily accented but understandable standard galactic language. Captain Vextar introduced himself as the commander of the Void Reaper and immediately demanded that the human ship prepare for boarding and cargo inspection. His tone was aggressive and threatening as he explained that resistance would result in the destruction of their vessel and the death of everyone aboard. Jake tried to remain calm and diplomatic as he responded to the pirate captain. He explained that Aurora's Dawn was a peaceful merchant vessel carrying legal cargo to an established colony world. He offered to transmit their manifest and travel documents to prove their legitimate business purpose. The Zephyrian captain seemed amused by Jake's cooperative attitude and told him that paperwork would not save them from what was about to happen. Vextar demanded that all humans abandon their ship immediately and prepare to be taken as slaves to work in the pirate fleets. Mining operations. The bridge of Aurora's Dawn became completely silent as the pirates' words sank in. Every human crew member present felt their blood turn cold at the mention of slavery. Jake's diplomatic expression changed to something much harder and more dangerous as he processed what the alien had just said. Lisa Chun's hands tightened on her control panel while Katie Walsh began running calculations in her head about ramming speeds and collision courses. Neither woman spoke, but both understood that everything had just changed completely. The situation was no longer about losing cargo or money. Jake asked the pirate captain to repeat his demands to make sure he had understood correctly. Vextar seemed pleased to explain again that humans would make excellent slaves because of their reputation for hard work, and problem-solving abilities. He added that the females would be especially valuable for breeding purposes. The communication channel went quiet for several long seconds as Jake Morrison considered his response. His voice remained steady and polite when he finally spoke, but everyone on the bridge could hear the deadly undertone that had entered his words. He told the pirate captain that slavery was not acceptable under any circumstances. Vextar became angry at what he saw as defiance from inferior creatures who should be grateful to serve their betters. He ordered his gunners to fire warning shots at the human ship to demonstrate their superior firepower. Energy beams struck Aurora's Dawn hull plates and caused minor damage to non-essential systems. Pete Rodriguez reported from the engine room that the hits had not caused serious problems, but had damaged some external sensors. Dan Foster added that no crew members were injured, but everyone was now fully aware that they were under attack by hostile forces. Jake made one final attempt at peaceful resolution by offering to transfer some of their cargo to the pirates in exchange for safe passage. He explained that fighting would be costly for both sides and suggested that negotiation would benefit everyone involved. The Zephyrian captain rejected this offer with contempt and told Jake that humans had nothing to negotiate with except their own bodies and labor. Vextar explained that his crew had successfully captured dozens of ships in this sector, and that resistance was pointless against superior alien technology. What the pirate captain did not understand was that his threats had awakened something deep and primitive in the human crew. Slavery was humanity's greatest historical shame, and modern humans would die before accepting chains again. The crew of Aurora's Dawn began preparing for war with cold determination. Pete Rodriguez quietly began rerouting power systems to equipment that was not normally connected to the main grid. Tony Garcia started opening access panels to mechanical systems that could be modified quickly. Steve Miller began moving through the cargo bay with new purposes for the equipment stored there. Katie Walsh continued her pilot duties, but was now calculating vectors for ramming attacks and evasive maneuvers. Amy Turner began scanning communication frequencies for any other ships in the area, while also preparing to jam the pirate vessel's transmissions. Dan Foster opened his medical supplies and began preparing items that could serve purposes beyond healing. Rick Barnes started moving cargo containers to create defensive positions and barriers throughout the ship. Carol Adams began plotting emergency courses to systems with human military presence. Jake Morrison gave the pirate captain his final answer in a voice that remained perfectly calm and professional. He explained that the crew of Aurora's Dawn would not surrender their ship or their freedom under any circumstances. He suggested that the pirates reconsider their attack and find easier targets elsewhere. Vextar laughed at what he considered empty bravado from desperate creatures facing certain defeat. He told his crew to prepare boarding parties and ordered his gunners to disable the human ship's engines. The Zephyrian captain was confident that the humans would surrender quickly once they realized their hopeless situation. The first mistake the pirates made was underestimating human determination when their families were threatened. 3 crew members had spouses and children waiting for them on New Dakota. The second mistake was not understanding that humans had been fighting for survival since they lived in caves on their dangerous home world. Jake Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew and saw the same cold resolve in every expression. These people were not just his employees, they were his family, and no one threatened human family without consequences. He gave his final order as a merchant captain before becoming something much more dangerous. The Aurora's Dawn powered up systems that were not listed on any manifest, while her crew prepared to show the Zephyrian pirates why humans were classified as the most dangerous species in known space. The first boarding party of 8 Zephyrian pirates cut through Aurora's Dawn outer airlock with plasma torches and entered the ship expecting to find terrified merchants hiding in corners. Instead, they found empty corridors with strange modifications that had not been there in the ship's original blueprints. Boarding party. Leader Threxavol led his team through the main corridor toward the bridge, while his soldiers checked each room they passed. The humans seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving behind only their normal equipment and supplies. This made the Zephyrian officer suspicious, because prey usually tried to hide in obvious places. The pirates did not notice the small cameras that tracked their movements or the nearly invisible wires that had been strung at ankle height across several doorways. They also missed the fact that the lighting had been dimmed just enough to hide important details, while still allowing them to see where they were going. Steve Miller waited in the cargo bay with tools that had been designed for loading heavy equipment but worked just as well for other purposes. The plasma torch in his hands could cut through metal plates or alien armor with equal effectiveness. The steel cables he carried were rated to lift 5-ton containers, but could also bind prisoners or create very effective traps. Pete Rodriguez had been busy in the hour since the pirates announced their intentions. The ship's loading mechs were now armed with improvised weapons made from spare parts and agricultural equipment. Hydraulic systems designed to lift cargo containers now powered ram devices that could punch through bulkheads. The artificial gravity system had been modified to create zones of crushing force and areas of zero gravity that would confuse attackers who were not familiar with the ship's layout. Pete could control these effects from his engineering station and create tactical advantages for the human crew. Dan Foster had opened his medical supplies and discovered that many healing compounds became extremely dangerous when mixed in different combinations. Industrial cleaning chemicals stored in the maintenance sections could create explosive reactions or poisonous gases when combined properly. The first contact between humans and pirates occurred when Threxavel's team reached the cargo bay entrance. Steve Miller stepped out from behind a shipping container and politely asked the aliens to surrender peacefully. The Zephyrian leader responded by ordering his soldiers to kill the human immediately. What happened next shocked the pirates beyond their ability to understand. Steve Miller moved with speed and precision that seemed impossible for such a large creature. The plasma torch in his hands became a weapon of surgical accuracy, while the steel cables turned into binding devices that trapped 3 pirates before they could raise their weapons. The remaining pirates fired their energy weapons at the human, but found that shipping containers made excellent cover while cargo loading equipment made very effective shields. Steve Miller used the bay's overhead crane system to drop heavy containers on his attackers while using magnetic clamps to disarm them. Meanwhile, the second boarding party had entered through the ship's secondary airlock and was moving toward the engine room. They expected to find the ship's power source undefended and easy to disable. Instead, they walked into a maze of redirected steam pipes and electrical conduits that had been turned into defensive weapons. Tony Garcia and Pete Rodriguez had worked together to turn the engine room into a fortress using nothing but standard maintenance equipment and spare parts. High-pressure steam could be released at specific locations to create barriers or weapons. Electrical systems could be overloaded to create stunning effects or electromagnetic pulses. The pirates found themselves fighting an enemy that used their own ship against them. Bulkhead doors could be sealed remotely to trap attackers, while ventilation systems could be used to fill areas with smoke or toxic gases. Emergency lighting created confusing shadows that hid human defenders. Katie Walsh had turned the Aurora's dawn into a weapon by using the ship's engines and maneuvering thrusters in ways that were not mentioned in any pilot training manual. The cargo vessel began spinning and accelerating in patterns that made the attacking pirates sick while throwing their own ship off balance. Amy Turner discovered that the pirate ship's communication systems used standard galactic protocols that were vulnerable to interference from modified human equipment. She began broadcasting false orders to different pirate teams, while jamming their ability to coordinate attacks. The third boarding party tried to reach the bridge, but found themselves lost in corridors that seemed to change configuration as they moved through them. Rick Barnes had used cargo containers and emergency barriers to create a maze that channeled attackers into predetermined killing zones. Carol Adams used the ship's navigation systems to plot courses that would take them toward the nearest human patrol routes while sending distress signals on frequencies that only human ships monitored. Help was coming, but the crew had to survive long enough for it to arrive. The pirates began to realize that they were not fighting helpless merchants, but rather a coordinated military unit that had turned an entire cargo ship into a weapon system. Every human they encountered fought with tactical intelligence and creative brutality that seemed impossible for supposedly peaceful traders. Captain Vexstar watched from his command center as his boarding parties reported increasing casualties and no progress toward securing the human ship. The creatures that his database had described as technologically inferior were systematically destroying his best soldiers using improvised weapons and tactics. The Zephyrian captain ordered more troops to board the human vessel, while his gunners prepared to destroy sections of the ship that seemed too well defended. He was beginning to understand that his prey was much more dangerous than expected, but his pride would not allow him to retreat. Dan Foster had set up a medical station in the ship's main corridor where he treated minor injuries to human crew members while also preparing more chemical weapons for use against the invaders. His medical knowledge included detailed information about alien biology that proved useful for creating specific toxins. The battle for Aurora's dawn continued as more pirates entered the ship and found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to behave like victims. The humans used every tool, every system, and every piece of equipment as weapons while working together with coordination that impressed even their enemies. Jake Morrison coordinated the defense from the bridge while monitoring the progress of each boarding party through internal sensors. His crew was holding their own against superior numbers and better weapons by using superior tactics and complete familiarity with their own ship. The pirates were learning why humans were classified as Deathworlders, but the lesson was proving more expensive than anyone had expected. Captain Vexstar stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief as his fourth boarding party reported heavy casualties and no progress towards securing any vital systems on the human ship. 20 of his best soldiers were now dead or missing, and the remaining pirates were requesting immediate reinforcement or extraction. The Zephyrian captain had raided hundreds of ships during his career and had never encountered resistance like this from any species. The humans fought with a combination of tactical intelligence and savage determination that defied every expectation his crew had developed about merchant vessels and civilian populations. Technical Officer Drex Mall reported that the human ship's power signature was fluctuating in ways that suggested major modifications to standard systems. Energy was being routed to equipment that should not exist on a cargo vessel, and electromagnetic pulses were interfering with their sensors and communication equipment. Amy Turner had successfully hacked into the pirate ship's internal communication network and was now broadcasting false orders to different boarding parties. She sent conflicting instructions that caused confusion and friendly fire incidents while making it impossible for the pirates to coordinate their attacks effectively. The fifth boarding party entered Aurora's dawn through a breach they had cut in the ship's hull, but they found themselves in a section of the cargo hold that had been deliberately flooded with zero-gravity conditions. Rick Barnes used magnetic grapples and cargo nets to capture the disoriented aliens while they struggled to move in an environment they were not trained for. Pete Rodriguez had turned the ship's environmental systems into weapons by controlling temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure in different sections. Pirates found themselves gasping for air in some areas while being frozen or overheated in others. The humans seemed unaffected by these changes because they knew which areas to avoid. Steve Miller had armed himself with a complete toolkit of improvised weapons created from agricultural equipment and maintenance supplies. A hydraulic jack became a crushing device, while a plasma welder turned into a precision cutting tool. Emergency oxygen tanks could be used as projectile weapons or explosive devices, depending on the situation. The pirates were beginning to understand that the no weapons listed designation on the human ship's manifest had been technically accurate but completely misleading. When humans decided to fight, everything became a weapon, including the ship itself, the cargo, and the laws of physics. Ban Foster had established a field medical station that also served as a chemical weapons laboratory where he created compounds that could disable or kill alien attackers. His knowledge of Zephyrian biology, gained from medical databases, allowed him to create toxins that were specifically effective against reptilian nervous systems. Katie Walsh continued to use the Auroras Dawn is a battering ram by employing orbital mechanics and gravitational effects to damage the pirate vessel. The cargo ship's engines were not designed for combat maneuvers, but human pilots had been performing impossible flight operations since they first left their home planet. The sixth boarding party managed to reach the ship's main corridor but found themselves trapped in a maze of cargo containers that had been arranged to create killing zones and defensive positions. Tony Garcia used industrial equipment to create barriers, while Carl Adams provided sniper support from concealed positions. Captain Vexstar made his second major mistake when he decided to threaten the human crew's families through subspace communication. He broadcast a message to New Dakota Colony, threatening to destroy their settlement if the Aurora's Dawn crew did not surrender immediately. The effect of this threat was exactly the opposite of what the pirate captain intended. Instead of causing panic and surrender, it filled the human crew with cold rage that made them even more dangerous than before. Jake Morrison's response was delivered in a voice that remained perfectly calm while promising consequences that terrified even hardened pirates. Amy Turner immediately sent a priority distress signal to Earth Defense Force headquarters that included details about the threat to New Dakota Colony. She explained that pirates were threatening civilian populations and requesting immediate military response from the nearest patrol fleet. The seventh boarding party tried to reach the bridge, but encountered Lisa Chun and Katie Walsh, who had armed themselves with emergency equipment and turned the ship's navigation systems into targeting devices for improvised weapons. The women fought with precision and teamwork that impressed even their enemies. Carol Adams had successfully contacted 3 different human patrol ships that were now racing toward their location at maximum speed. Admiral Susan Clark of the Earth Defense Force ship Vengeance was leading a task force that would arrive within 6 hours if the Aurora's Dawn crew could continue their resistance. The pirates discovered that fighting humans in close quarters was completely different from their previous experiences with other species. Humans seemed to feel no fear of death when protecting their families, and they used tactics that combined military training with desperate creativity. Drexmal reported to his captain that the human ship's reactor was being deliberately overloaded. In a controlled manner, it would create electromagnetic pulses without destroying the vessel. The technical sophistication required for this modification suggested that the crew included trained military personnel disguised as merchants. Jake Morrison coordinated his crew's defense while simultaneously broadcasting detailed reports about pirate activities to every human ship and station within communication range. The Aurora's Dawn had become the center of a growing military response that would soon overwhelm the Zephyrian raiders. The 8th boarding party requested permission to retreat after encountering Dan Foster's chemical weapons and Steve Miller's improvised explosive devices. The human crew was systematically eliminating trained soldiers using nothing but standard civilian equipment and superior tactical thinking. Tony Garcia rigged the ship's power systems to create electrical weapons that could stun or kill attackers while leaving human crew members unharmed. His engineering knowledge allowed him to modify standard equipment in ways that turned maintenance tools into military-grade weapons. Captain Vexstar finally began to understand the true nature of his mistake. The species that classified itself as peaceful merchants was the same species that had conquered one of the most dangerous planets in known space. Humans had evolved to survive conditions that would kill most other life forms, and they applied those survival skills to everything they did. The Zephyrian captain realized that his crew was being systematically destroyed by opponents who refused to follow conventional rules of engagement. The humans fought like cornered animals, but with the intelligence and coordination of a trained military unit. Rick Barnes had turned the cargo hold into a fortress using shipping containers and industrial equipment to create defensive positions that channeled attackers into predetermined kill zones. The pirates found themselves fighting for every meter of corridor while taking casualties they could not afford to lose. The battle for Aurora's Dawn had become a demonstration of why humans were feared throughout the galaxy, despite their reputation for peaceful trade and diplomatic solutions. The final confrontation began when Captain Vexstar realized that his boarding parties had failed completely and that human reinforcements were approaching rapidly. With more than half his crew dead or wounded, the Zephyrian captain made the desperate decision to lead the remaining pirates in a direct assault on Aurora's Dawn Bridge. Jake Morrison stood calmly in the center of his command center while his crew prepared for the last battle. Lisa Chun had armed herself with a plasma torch, while Katie Walsh held a magnetic grapple that could crush alien bones. The bridge had been turned into a fortress using control panels and emergency equipment as defensive barriers. Captain Vexstar and his 12 surviving soldiers cut through the bridge entrance with heavy weapons and expected to find cowering merchants ready to surrender. Instead, they found humans who looked at them with the cold eyes of predators defending their territory. The pirate captain finally understood that he had made a terrible mistake. Jake Morrison stepped forward and spoke to the alien invaders in the same polite tone he had used throughout their encounter. He explained that the pirates had violated several fundamental human principles and that their actions had consequences that extended far beyond this single ship. The human captain told Vexstar that threatening slavery was considered an act of war by Earth government and that attacking civilian vessels carrying medical supplies was classified as a crime against humanity. He added that threatening colonial settlements would result in military retaliation against pirate bases throughout the sector. Amy Turner announced that Earth Defense Force ships had arrived in the system and were demanding the immediate surrender of all pirate vessels. Admiral Susan Clark of the battleship Vengeance was broadcasting on all frequencies that resistance would be met with overwhelming force and complete destruction. Captain Vexstar looked at his tactical display and saw that his single pirate ship was now surrounded by 6 human warships that outgunned him by a factor of 20 to 1. The merchant vessel he had thought would be easy prey had somehow contacted the most feared military force in known space. The Zephyrian captain tried one last desperate negotiation by offering to release the human ship in exchange for safe passage out of the system. Jake Morrison explained that this was no longer possible because the pirates had crossed lines that could not be uncrossed. Pete Rodriguez reported that the Aurora's Dawn reactor modifications were complete and that the ship could now generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable the pirate vessel permanently. Tony Garcia added that explosive charges had been placed throughout their own ship to prevent it from being captured if the final battle went badly. Dan Foster had prepared chemical weapons that would flood the pirate ship with toxins specifically, designed to affect Zephyrian nervous systems. Steve Miller stood ready with improvised weapons that could kill every remaining pirate in close combat. The human crew was prepared to die fighting rather than accept slavery. Admiral Clark's voice filled the bridge as she offered the pirates their final choice between surrender and destruction. The Earth Defense Force commander explained that attacking human civilians was an act of war and that her orders were to eliminate all threats to colonial settlements. Captain Vextar realized that his database information about humans had been completely wrong. The species that appeared peaceful and technologically inferior had just demonstrated military capabilities that exceeded most advanced civilizations. The creatures he had thought were easy prey had turned his experienced crew into casualties using improvised weapons. The pirate captain looked around the bridge of Aurora's Dawn and saw humans who showed no fear of death and no willingness to compromise on matters of principle. These were not the weak merchants his intelligence reports had described, but rather representatives of a species that had survived on a death world by becoming the most dangerous predators in their environment. Rick Barnes announced that the cargo hold had been completely secured and that all surviving pirates were now prisoners of the human crew. Carol Adams reported that navigation systems were ready to dock with the Earth Defense Force ships for prisoner transfer and damage assessment. Jake Morrison gave Captain Vextar one final explanation of what had gone wrong with the pirate attack. The no weapons listed designation on their manifest had been accurate because human weapons did not fit into standard galactic categories. When humans decided to fight, everything became a weapon, including physics, chemistry, and pure determination. Zephyrian captain asked how a simple cargo ship had been able to defeat his experienced raiding crew. Jake explained that Aurora's Dawn was crewed by humans, and humans had been turning ordinary objects into weapons since they lived in caves on their dangerous home world. Katie Walsh demonstrated this principle by showing how the ship's pilot controls could be used to turn a cargo vessel into a kinetic weapon capable of destroying much larger ships. Lisa Chun explained how sensor equipment could be modified to target enemies, while Amy Turner showed how communication systems could become electronic warfare tools. Admiral Clark boarded Aurora's Dawn with a full Marine escort to take custody of the surviving pirates and assess the situation. The Earth Defense Force commander was impressed by the crew's successful defense, but not surprised because she understood what humans were capable of when their families were threatened. The pirate ship Void Reaper was taken as a prize of war, while its surviving crew faced charges of attempted slavery, assault on civilian vessels, and threats against colonial populations. Captain Vextar would spend the rest of his life in a human prison facility, learning about the species he had tried to enslave. Jake Morrison filed his official report explaining why Aurora's Dawn would need extensive repairs, including a new cargo bay, replacement hull plating, and complete overhaul of all modified systems. The insurance paperwork became legendary among galactic bureaucrats who had never seen damage reports from a successful merchant vessel defense. The story of the Auroras Dawn spread throughout pirate networks within days of the incident. Criminal organizations learned that the species which listed no weapons on their manifests was the same species that considered everything a potential weapon, including the ship, the crew, and the fundamental forces of the universe. 6 months later, attacks on human merchant vessels dropped to zero as pirates chose easier targets from other species. The Aurora's Dawn continued its regular cargo runs with the same crew and the same no weapons listed designation on all official documents. Captain Morrison politely declined requests from other species to provide security consultation services. He explained that his crew were simple merchants trying to make an honest living by delivering supplies to colonies that needed them. After all, their manifest still clearly stated no weapons listed, and humans always told the truth about their paperwork.